The BBC was forced to apologise to Dow Chemical today for broadcasting a hoax interview by an anti-corporate protester. The man appeared on BBC World claiming to be a representative of the Dow Chemical Group and said that the company was giving the victims of the Bhopal disaster a $12 billion sum in compensation. Well, the prank, which briefly knocked 3% off Dow shares, comes 20 years to the day after the chemical leak from the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal, which killed 3,500 people. In a moment, we'll hear from the prankster himself, but first, here's our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson.
In New Delhi, protesters have been holding candlelit vigils for the 20th anniversary of the day when 40 tons of lethal methyl isocyanate leaked from the Bhopal fertilizer works in central India. 20 years on from the world's worst industrial accident, over 3,000 people were killed, 500,000 still affected. But this day of protest has been surreal. At 10:09 this morning, this suddenly flashed up on the news wires.
Dow Chemical says accepts full responsibility for Bhopal disaster.
Even bigger, a minute later, 10:10, and they put a price on it.
Dow Chemical says has $12 billion compensation plan for Bhopal victims.
At 10:25, Reuters had quotes from a Dow company man, Jude Finisterra. Apologies, billions for the victims, sackcloth, ashes, it was all here. Some BBC scoop.
Today, I am very, very happy to announce that today, for the first time, Dow is accepting full responsibility for the Bhopal catastrophe.
Fair enough. The respected BBC World News thought they were onto something big because they'd been here to a Dow Chemical website.
Dow is responsible for the birth of the modern environmental movement.
Dow, living, improve daily.
Dow Karma, treating others as we would like to be treated.
You've guessed it, it's all a spoof. Well, it doesn't do to be too clever with hindsight. The BBC journalists were just acting in good faith, but they'd been had. By these people. Jude Finisterra turns out to be this man, Andy Bickelbaum. He's the one on the left. In more ways than one. They're part of the Yes Men, a bunch of lefty protesters. We followed them during the American elections as they tried to unhinge the Bush campaign. And they don't like Dow much either. So he chose the name Jude Finisterra, Jude being the patron saint of lost causes, Finisterra, the end of the world. Frankly, the Yes Men cannot quite believe their luck today. Oh, and the Dow share price took an immediate tumble of over 3%. By 11:18 this morning, the news wires were in corporate denial.
Dow Chemical says there's no basis whatsoever in BBC Bhopal report.
And all day, the BBC have been facing up to an honest mistake.
Well, earlier today, we carried an interview with someone purporting to be from Dow Chemical, a company which subsequently bought the plant from Union Carbide. This interview was inaccurate and part of an elaborate deception.
In Delhi tonight, the protesters were bemused by the Western prank, but their fight for justice and to get the plant finally cleaned up continues.
With something as massive as this, we'll have to force them to be accountable. We'll have to find ways for them to be made accountable.
All that 20 years to the day from the disaster, and the Union Carbide plant stands brooding even now over Bhopal. Today's unlikely corporate humiliation of a US chemical giant was all about reminding the world that Bhopal remains an unhealed sore.
Well, earlier I spoke to Andy Bickelbaum and I asked him what he did when he got an email from the BBC asking him for an interview.
When we received the invitation, it took us a little while to decide what to do, but we decided that essentially Dow has been promulgating a hoax by which they've convinced people that they can't do anything about Bhopal, that they cannot accept responsibility. And we wanted to prove that that was not accurate and to show that they could, in fact, easily accept responsibility and that there was something very concrete they could do about it. They could simply devote a relatively small amount of money to finally putting this behind them and, more importantly, behind the world.
The trouble is, of course, that they argue that they did do that, you know, with the original settlement with the Indian government.
Yes, they've also said that $500 is plenty good for an Indian. I'm quoting PR head of Dow, Kathy Hunt. She said that 2 years ago. $500 is worth more in India than it is in, say, the UK, but it still only pays for a year of medical care. The 120,000 people that are estimated to need medical care because of the Bhopal catastrophe are going to need it their whole lives. They've already needed it for 20 years.
There is, in the end, though, a very painful sting in today's tale in that the torchlit protest which appeared in Bhopal today thought for a moment that they had an extraordinary and unexpected gift from Dow, and it all turned out to be untrue, and indeed there were many people in tears tonight.
Well, as I understood it, there were people in tears of joy when they found out, and indeed it is very sad that this isn't the case, but you have to realize that this is Dow's doing. I mean, Dow could make the tears of joy that there were real and could prolong them. It would be a very simple matter for Dow to do that.
Well, but at the end of the day, I mean, it is nevertheless a pretty cruel trick to play on the people of Bhopal. I mean, even if you manage to hit a few spikes at Dow.
Well, we want to show that another world is possible and that Dow could do the right thing.
But did you think about the people of Bhopal when you decided to peddle this stunt?
Yes, we did. And the people of Bhopal have endured 20 years of waiting, which doesn't just include false hope. I mean, they have hoped for 20 years for something. Presumably, they've hoped for 20 years. Many of them have died.
Well, that surely is the tragedy of today. You spring upon them the actual hoax that they actually suddenly believe that they have got a payout from Dow, and then, you know, an hour or two later they find it's untrue.
Well, come on, let's get a bit of perspective. I mean, Dow has refused to take responsibility for what they've done for 120,000 people who will need a lifetime of care, for 20,000 people by conservative estimates who have died over the years because of this. Still, one person dies every day because of this, of course. Dow has refused to clean up the site. Let's put this in contrast. I mean, we may have given two people 2 hours of false hope. Dow has given them 20 years of suffering. I mean, this is what we're faced
expecting
with.
the next knock at the door to be Dow's lawyer?
No idea what Dow will do.